If this is you today, then this would have been you in 1776. I'd like to welcome you back to my channel. I know I haven't uploaded in a hot minute, but this topic, especially today, it's July 4th, 2026, 250th celebration of this American experiment in minimal government and maximum individual liberty. And it also marks the pretty much standard lifespan length of any of the empires that we've seen throughout history, with the exception of a few. So with that opening statement, right, that tends to, anytime that sort of meme comes up, especially in conservative circles, it brings a whole lot of emotions and a whole lot of anger out in a whole lot of people. And a whole lot of people don't think, and they refuse to, they refuse to accept that meme as a reality. They think that those two things are separate. They think that, they like to position themselves. And again, we're talking about pretty much half the country, right? We're talking about the right side of the political spectrum, the people who are, right-wingers, Republicans, people who ostensibly want small government, people who, truly want small government, right? They want, maximum freedom, or so they say, right? They're the people who are pro-Trump. They're the people who are, even some libertarians and that kind of thing. Although I'm mostly speaking of the people who consider themselves right-wing exclusively as opposed to libertarian. Those people immediately get into an anger and a rage whenever you bring up the fact that they wouldn't be on the side of the revolutionaries in all likelihood when the Revolutionary War is happening. The Revolutionary War was only fought by about 10 to 11% of the colonials, and the vast majority of people were either neutral or they were pro-crown. And the reason why I opened up the video the way that I did is to, remind people, and hopefully remind the viewer, that effectively the people at the time, I got some cows walking over here, so an audience. The people at the time, during 1776, who were, agents of the crown, the redcoats, effectively were the law enforcers of the day. They were the ones who would levy the taxes. They were the ones who would enforce the laws. All of the people who were not neutral, but who were pro the crown were effectively the thin blue line people of the day. And so the saying, the equivalence of the pro-police type of people, the thin blue line type of people nowadays who are pro-law enforcement and pro-law and order, is an accurate comparison, because you have people nowadays who believe and they say that they are for law enforcement. They are for the rule of law. Well, effectively, they are for the dictates of the ruling class of today. So to say that you're pro-law enforcement, to say that you're pro-rule of law today, aka in favor of the enforcement of laws and in favor of the existence of an enforcement demographic, an enforcement basically group of people that forces the law upon everybody else. There's quite literally no difference from you and the people who back in the day, back in 1776, who said, well, it's treasonous. What you were doing is treason to, dump all that tea in the harbor and to protest these taxes and to go against the crown. So this is the one thing that's really lost on a huge number of people who still haven't, who haven't taken the red pill. They haven't seen the whole system for the sham that it is, and how anti-freedom and how destructive of individual liberties the current system that we have truly is. And the irony is lost on them. They don't really see the forest through the trees. They don't recognize that absolutely, just like they're, pro law enforcement, they're pro the maintenance of this current system today, how that is the exact same as the people back in the day who were in favor of maintaining the system back then and maintaining the stranglehold that the crown, that King George III back in the day had upon the colonies. They're the ones that were saying, oh, 2% tax is not that big of a deal. And the irony as well is lost on these people when you realize that back in those days, back in the days of King George III, we were struggling with the 2% tax on tea and imports. Compare that today, where we have more than 50% tax rates if you take everything into consideration. If you take in income tax, if you take in property tax, if you take inheritance tax, vehicle registrations, you take in and a huge one is the inflation tax that a lot of people don't really consider. Upwards of 50% taxation now from the 3% that we had back then. And back then, that was the source of the American Revolution. That was the source of our indignation, our revolutionary spirit. And we were more effectively, more free back then with King George III's tyranny than we are today with all of the regulation, all of the absolute depravity that we see day to day now in the news cycle being exposed, day by day. We had it better back then than we do now. And yet people still think that the existence that we have in this country is somehow at all relative to freedom. I mean, we still have access to guns, like we still have, the vestiges of what this country was supposed to be. We have the vestiges of a free market system. We have the vestiges of individual liberties, but by and large, it's a husk of what it was supposed to be and what it should be. And I think that's just the absolute unfortunate aspect and unfortunate, thing about today is that people don't really recognize that. I mean, there's a lot of people that realize the issues, or at least on a very simplistic level, understand that things aren't the way they should be, that things are actually really, really bad. But people are still keen on saying, oh yeah, this is the best country ever, which, whatever. I'm not going to get into that argument, whether this is the best country ever or not. There's all kinds of bad places that you could be on this planet. I'm not arguing that. But when we compare what this country was meant to be, and an actual area of 100% individual liberties, everybody stands on their own merits. Everybody shares the same rights as everybody else. And everybody's opportunities are open, and the only rules that are supposed to be followed are those rules that bind people to respect the rights of others, that bind people to respect and to not cross and damage other people's property and hurt other people. That was what this was meant to be. but it's very, very rapidly and quickly changing into just the status quo that the rest of the world has always seen. You know, the same sort of slavery, the same sort of government enslavement, the same sort of, you know, rapid tax, like I mentioned, the rapid and insane taxation, the plunder of everybody's, you know, economic output. And we're just rapidly losing what this was supposed to be. And it's really unfortunate. But I do think that the spirit of 1776 is ultimately a lot more powerful than the spirit of 1984, right? To kind of go off of an old sort of Alex Jones thing that he had for a while, right? It's a lot more powerful. The spirit of 1776 is a lot more powerful, but the problem is that people don't understand what freedom is. They don't understand what the spirit of 1776 actually was. You can't be pro-police and pro-military. The founding fathers didn't even want this country to have a standing army in the first place, a lot of them. You can't be pro-big government and be pro-individual liberty at the same time. You can't even be pro-small government and be pro-individual liberty, because look at what happened over the last 250 years. We have the largest, most corrupt government and most murderous government we've ever had. And very, very quickly, the experiment in individual liberty that this country was supposed to be has now been morphed and dragged through the mud and is rapidly turning into the exact thing that it was meant to not be, that it was set out to basically put a stop to. None of this was supposed to happen, but it did, because the seed of authority, the seed of the cancer that is government was sown and has expanded to what it is now. It is inevitable. And this is the one thing that I want to leave you with, that you hopefully, dear viewer, internalize, is that there is no effective way to limit the scope of the state. There is no effective way to limit the growth of government. Small government is an oxymoron. You cannot have small government. If you initiate a government, if you say this group of people, this individual group of people have the right to dictate unto others how they must live, how they must use their money, how they must do X, Y, and Z. Once you set that precedent, it will always end the same way, and history has shown us time and time again that this is the end result every single time. There is no such thing as free government. There is no such thing as limited government. So hopefully people will quickly begin to realize this and internalize this, and that way the true spirit of 1776 can actually flourish, and we can actually have a free, prosperous society based on non-aggression and the self-defense principle. And we can finally put to rest this idea that there are some people who are meant to be masters and other people who are meant to be slaves. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. See you in the next one.